if it's no good, we'll throw it away.
No, I think that's fine with us.
Yeah.
So I might just start with a quick acknowledgement of country and pay my respects to traditional owners, past and present and emerging, and just want to acknowledge that we're all on Aboriginal lands and waterways today, wherever we're working across the state. So with that, I might also just quickly welcome, we've got obviously a number of people from Water and Catchments interested to hear from you, and we've got, I can see a couple of guests from, or our colleagues from Treasury as well, and can't see if we've got Health online, but they might be joining us. So thanks heaps for making the time today, to Steve and Therese and your team. These are really valuable and important sessions for us, so we do appreciate that they're a big chunk of your time in preparation, and then coming and presenting to us and hopefully fielding a few questions at the end. So with that, I might hand over to you.
Thanks, Heidi. It's a pleasure to be here, and I guess I'd also like to acknowledge that only last week was NAIDOC week, and the Care for Country message this year, and acknowledge the Gunnakurni people, the traditional owners of the land in which we're operating in East Gippsland. So thank you. I'm pleased to lead off the presentation, but I'll be joined by Matt Scott and Lara Caplygin. I might actually just start the presentation so I don't get too far ahead of myself here, and I'll just share that. So are you all able to see that?
All good.
Good. Well, that's always great when that happens. Yeah, so Matt and Lara will join me through the presentation, but we also have in the audience Therese Tierney, our chair, David Radford, our corporate secretary, and Mark McNeil, our executive manager, service delivery. So I'm sure we'll have plenty of people to answer any questions that might come up during the presentation. So first up, the presentation will be in two parts. We're going to start with a bit of just an intro to East Gippsland Water, our priorities that we've stated in the corporate plan, and then some supporting financial numbers around our financial sustainability. And we're going to take a bit of a break at that point and sort of opportunity for questions about that part of the presentation. Then we'll recommence and go through our actions against the letter of expectation, if that's okay. So off we go. So first up, just a couple of, I guess, statistics about East Gippsland Water. I'm not going to go through them in detail, just highlight that that's us, the very eastern tip of Victoria, and 21,000 kilometres equates to about 10% of Victoria. So it's a fairly large area, and across that area we only have about 100 staff delivering our services to all of the various communities. So we're stretched pretty thin. It's a challenge to provide services consistently across that area, but we also think it's a bit of an advantage for us because we are embedded in the communities. It's very transparent. Everyone knows who you are. So we feel we're in a good position to understand our community needs. And Lara will touch on that when she talks about our community engagement process for the price submission later on in the presentation. Some more statistics, and I guess this slide really just highlights our core assets that we have to maintain. We manage and maintain about $900 million of assets to provide services to the communities of East Gippsland, and which require constant maintenance and attention. So this is really the core part of our business, and it's a good segue into our priorities. So three priorities I'm going to touch on in this part of the presentation are the impacts of climate change, a step change in asset management, and ensuring commercial sustainability. Interestingly, our challenges are very similar to the challenges that Vic Water have identified in a study they did across the whole water sector in Victoria, which was released earlier this year. So our challenges are not unique. I'm going to start with climate change. We've certainly had in the last 18 months the drought fires and floods. The picture at the top right shows the area of East Gippsland that was burnt during the bushfires, and was in fact more than 50% of East Gippsland was burnt, mostly in a very short period from about the 30th of December through to about the middle of January. The picture below that shows taken just outside our office in Bairnsdale, probably about New Year's Eve. And as you can see, the fires were on the horizon. They were about 10 kilometres away, and that was luckily as close as they got. The wind changed direction and blew the fires away, but every community in East Gippsland was affected and under threat. At the same time, we were grappling with the fires and trying to maintain service to customers and keep our workplace safe for our own staff. We were also trying to get progress water restrictions. So the same 3-year drought that led to the Tinder dry catchment and the bushfires also meant that the rivers throughout East Gippsland were flowing at their lowest levels on record ever. So we were already on stage 2 when the fires were sweeping across East Gippsland in January, and our modelling indicated that we could be on stage 4 by March. So this was pretty significant background story going on at the same time as the fires. Fortunately, we had some rain in February, which helped to, ease the fires, and we didn't end up on stage 4 restrictions, but the rain simply created another event because that then washed all the soot and silt from the fires into the rivers, and we ended up with about a 4-month water quality event going on. Now, those fires and then the rain and the dirty water highlighted how reliant we are on our local rivers. And just to explain, whereas Melbourne might have 3 or 4 years of water in storage at any particular time, in East Gippsland, our, standard of service is that we would have 3 or 4 months of water for most of our communities. And we rely on continuous pumping from local rivers to keep topping our storages up. So we can survive a few weeks or a month or so when the water quality is not available, water's not available, but a few months, which is the pattern we seem to be experiencing now, is a high risk for us. So we've identified we need to make some additional investment in off-stream water storage, particularly for the Mitchell River system, which supplies 85% of our customers. So we think the answer is fairly straightforward. The picture you can see on the screen now is of our Wood Glen water treatment plant just near Bairnsdale, and that supplies ultimately 85% of our customers. We own quite a bit of land here. So you can see the 2 storages. They effectively hold 3 or 4 months of water in summer. And so we believe the answer for us is to put a 3rd storage in. We own the land, we have plenty of bulk entitlement. It's a fairly simple engineering exercise to create another off-stream storage. So we still have some work to do to prove that up in an engineering sense and work through a business case process, but tentatively planned for about 23, 24, and that will add 1% to the average customer bill, but will also secure water resources for probably the next 30 years for the East Gippsland community based on our assumptions around growth and climate change. The next priority for us is what we're calling a step change in asset management. And you might ask, well, what does that mean? And the best way I can explain it is to say that it's a combination of the government's passion for flat prices, our own zeal to pay down debt, and some unexpected outcomes from this current price submission process in terms of price, have really led to a bit of a mindset of trying to defer investment as long as possible to try and fit within a CPI-only price envelope. Now, this is creating problems, or has created problems, where by deferring investment in projects, we're simply increasing risk. And so we decided a couple of years ago we needed to bring forward some investment, irrespective of what was in the price submission, to sort of manage those risks and to maintain services to customers. So I'll go through one example, but for the last couple of years, we've been working on improving our asset management processes and systems and our investment decision making. The example I'll show you is the picture in the screen, and it shows a truck that is actually unloading dewatered sludge that has been taken from our Bairnsdale wastewater plant, taken out of our couple of sewage lagoons, put through a centrifuge, dewatered, and then the dry product transferred to a storage facility at Paynesville. So what you're seeing there is the dry product. 675 truckloads of material were involved in that project, $4.5 million. That project was originally in our price submission that we developed back in 2017-18, but it was deferred because it was considered unaffordable because we ended up with a CPI-only price increase. The concept was we'll have another go in 5 years' time. As I said, this is just one example, and it created an unacceptable risk, we believe. So the risk here is that our EPA licence at our Bairnsdale wastewater plant we would not meet compliance on that on our licence, and that we would then potentially create environmental damage to the McLeod Morass wetlands, which is a Ramsar wetlands, to which we discharge. Unacceptable risk. We brought that project forward. It's just been completed earlier this year. So how are we going? So the consequences of some of this bringing forward investment and our extra effort in terms of core services, our debt, it will rise during this corporate plan period. It will rise to about $38 million. However, while that's a significant increase from our current debt level, the gearing ratio is actually very low. We're still only about 7.5%, which is probably still one of the lowest of any Victorian water business and very manageable. Some positives coming out of the process so far are that our asset management accountability framework, conformance, which is a DTF a framework or tool we have to self-assess against to demonstrate that we are investing in our business and in our assets, has moved from about 25% to 75% already. So that's a significant step forward. We've got a way to go, but it points out we're going in the right direction, as verified by that framework of treasuries and independent audit. Another positive indicator is that our capital replacement ratio, which measures the percentage of your capital program that you invest in your existing assets, so the $900 million of assets that we already have, will rise to 0.8, or in other words, 80% of our capital works investment will be on our existing assets. And it had been much lower. So there's a couple of real positive indicators for us that we're on the right track. But investing in existing assets to maintain service is not the only driver of asset investment at the moment. So I've talked about the impacts of climate change, extremes of drought, fires and floods. What we've seen locally, but also in Melbourne recently with the floods, is we can have communities isolated for long periods of time. So we need to invest in resilience in those communities to future-proof them against future climate change events. Many of our communities have one road in, one water pipeline, one electricity supply in. So an interruption to service can mean days or weeks. So for us, that means we will need to invest in additional electricity generators on site, extra chemical storages or water storages, or flood-proofing our wastewater plants. Another driver of investment in our assets is that because of COVID, as everyone knows, there's a bit of a population shift going on into regional Victoria. We're seeing an increase in population growth beyond what we'd assumed, and that's bringing forward capital investment as well. So for all these reasons, we need to be focusing on investing in our assets to make sure we can maintain services and future-proof the community for not only climate change, but for growth. The third priority we're highlighting in the corporate plan is what we're calling commercial sustainability. And I'm going to break this into two parts. Part one is the bit that we can control. And I've talked about what we're doing in terms of asset management, trying to improve our investment decision making so we make effective, prudent and efficient decisions. And that way we'll have the lowest cost of service that we can get. So that's something we can control. I talked about debt previously, and what I've just put up is a graph showing our debt profile since the early 2000s. And you see that it rises pretty rapidly from 2006, and that was because towards the end of the Millennium Drought, which was a decade-long drought, there was investment going on all across Victoria in terms of shoring up water reserves and water treatment. And that's what we were doing here in East Gippsland. There was significant investments made in a new water treatment plant in Bairnsdale and water storage, etc. So our debt rose a little bit below $40 million. And you'll notice that then there's almost a mirror image as it was rapidly paid down. So there was a strong focus by the business on paying that debt down as rapidly as possible with a view that we needed to get it back to zero. That rapid pay down of debt was achieved by minimising our investment in assets, which is the point I've made earlier, which we now want to sort of swing the pendulum back and make some long-term sustainable asset investment decisions. So you'll notice our debt is rising in the last year or two, and I've talked about that already. So the other part of commercial sustainability is the bit that we really have little or no control over. We have effectively no control over our prices or our revenue stream. And some unusual or unexpected outcomes coming through the ESC pricing process in the last 4 years. So I've said already that we had a pricing approval for our prices to increase by CPI each year. And I know that CPI has dropped because of COVID, to 1.1, 1.3% the last year or two, but it had been 2 or 2.5%. So you probably wouldn't be surprised if you thought our prices had been going up at 1, 2% every year for the last 4 years or so. In fact, our prices have barely moved. They've been flat. And because of the way the ESC adjusts the CPI figure, particularly taking into account the current low cost of interest. So they have a bit of a a theoretical model, which in fact is having the impact of pushing down our prices, despite the fact our price pathway says we could be putting them up at CPI. So at the same time, price is flat. Our costs are rising. Wages, which represent about 50% of our operating cost, have been rising at about 3% per year. We've also become liable to pay tax, and only some of that tax is sort of flowing through the pricing model. So what we're seeing is while our revenue stream is flat, our costs are going up, and that gap is widening. That's not sustainable, and that's something that we will be advocating with the ESC in the lead up to the next price submission. Just put in only 2 days ago, the ESC tweeted our customers to highlight to them how, in fact, our prices this year will fall by about $3. And despite the fact, as I've said, CPI has been at 1.1% for the year. So just to sum up, our priorities in this corporate plan are a new water storage, probably around $25 million, efficient investment in our assets to reduce risk and maintain service levels, and to address these pressures on price. At the moment, our modelling is indicating that once we get out of the current price submission period in 2023, we will require a CPI plus 2.4% price increase. Now, we've still got work to do. We hope to bring that back down, and our goal would be, CPI only. But for the next 12 months, we've got to work on that and come up with some ways of coming up with the best price submission we can and the least price to our customers. But at the moment, because we've had flat prices for the last few years, it's looking like there'll need to be a catch-up. So I'll go back. So I'm going to hand over to Matt Scott now. Matt's just going to provide a little bit of extra detail on financial sustainability, and then we'll break and take questions.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks everyone for the opportunity. So the next 6 to 7 slides will be a bit more detail on the financials, sort of wrapping up what Steve mentioned in his first few slides, and I just want to take you through some of the I guess work we're doing to try and meet this quote in our corporate plan. Steve, can you just flick to the next slide, please? So this slide's just a straight cut from the corporate plan, outlining our 5 years financials at a high level. You can see there that a couple of years there we make a couple of losses. The one in 2025 is another large desludging program at our Painesville wastewater treatment site. That's around $3.5 million. So it's another large, I guess, wouldn't say one-off, but a lumpy piece of OPEX that we see we need to do to address the risk out there. But I guess the thing I just want to point out there is if you have a look, we're making losses out of 2 of the 5 years there. The rest of the years are pretty positive, and the back end there is the first 3 years of the next pricing submission, and that does have that 2.4% real increase in there. We've done a lot of modelling, and we did a lot of modelling for our last strategy meeting, sort of based on the data we have now, coming through all the work being done internally to try and map out where our prices might need to go. It is early, we're still 15 months out from submitting our price submission, so there's a lot of work still to do, but I guess we've put where we sit at this point in time in those numbers. And just like to highlight the tax payments there. It's very hard sometimes to explain to people, why some years you actually make a loss and you end up paying tax. It's a little bit, back to front. Doesn't make a lot of sense. But I guess that's the quirkiness of the NTR system that we're in at the moment. Our tax depreciation is around half of our statutory depreciation. So there's a big in and out when we come to do our tax book, and that results in some large payments. And then just backing up on what Steve mentioned, the pricing model is worked on a benchmark tax liability, not on the NTR system. And I guess that, to be honest, works in customers' favours, because if we had to recoup the full amount of tax payable, it would probably be another $5 to $6 million in revenue over the 5 years. So it's something that we've got a good understanding of, and we're managing through our cash flow. But it's it's sometimes very interesting to explain that to people looking at our accounts. And last 2 lines, the CapEx, this current price submission, we've got about a $62 million spend, and we're looking really good to actually meet that, pretty much spot on. As was mentioned in the discussion as before we started, I guess the flagship project, the big water tank out at Wyong, is complete and online, which is great. But for the next price submission, we're actually looking at a 50% increase at this stage, up to around the $93 million mark in capital investment. Now, the Woodglen 3 being $25 million is 30% of that pretty much. So that accounts for a lot of that. But there's a lot of augmentation and upgrades to some major assets that are in there at this stage. And again, internally we're working through all the business cases and the requirements for that, and that may change. But at this stage, we are looking at a potential substantial increase in our capital expenditure over the next price submission. And then you can see the debt level. Steve mentioned that before. We are seeing it slowly increase, but on our current asset base of $900 million, that's quite manageable and reasonable for an infrastructure-rich business. Next slide, please, Steve. Again, I'm sort of just backing up what Steve mentioned around our prices. This graph here just shows the CPI change at the time. Well, it's the March quarter, when the EC used the March quarter to determine prices, and the cost of debt mechanism in the current price submission, which has been different to the previous 3 water plans. It's based on that 10-year rolling average cost of debt. And as we know, interest rates have certainly plummeted over the last 3 years, and that's, makes sense. So that will then drag that 10-year average down. And what we're seeing there is a direct impact on our prices being dragged down below the CPI approved price submission amount. And I guess I did a little bit of work, and the little table on the right there is just, the tariffs that we have in place now versus the tariffs we had in the last year, the last water plan, and you can see there that there's been very little movement at all in our tariffs. You know, the fixed charges, the water service fee and the sewage fee has actually decreased over 4 years, and there's been a slight increase in the volumetric fee. So overall, that's pretty flat prices, and that's in nominal terms too. It's not real, so it's quite, it's probably 4 or 5% below where we assumed we'd be with the price submission result. Steve, can you go to the next slide, please? So the next couple of slides is just a little bit of work around what's driving that proposed 2.4% increase at this stage. And you can see there, I mentioned a couple of slides ago, we're looking at a substantial increase in our capex, about a 50% uplift in the next price submission at this stage. A lot of it's around our water infrastructure at this point in time. There's certainly work happening around our wastewater, and that may swing around a little bit, but years 2, 3 and 4 there have our Woodglen number 3 built into that, and then we also have some other work at a couple of our larger water storages along the Mitchell system, and I'll show another little chart later on what impact that's having. But you can see there that is, that's increasing our regulatory asset base by about 33% over the proposed next price submission. So it's quite significant investment for a business of our size. Can we go to the next slide, Steve, please? Now, what does that mean all up? This is a really, like I said, I did this for our last strategy meeting, and it was sort of just trying to break down the revenue requirement where we're looking at next price submissions to where we are now. There's no doubt we've seen an increase in our OPEX. The desludging works is a main driver of that, but it's also, we've increased staff and that sort of thing to meet compliance needs and actual just business priorities to deliver on the things Steve outlined at the start of his presentation. So we're not stepping away from the fact that we've made conscious decisions to invest in people and that to deliver the outcomes required of the Water Corp. So that is driving that $13 million uplift over 5 years in OPEX. And the return of assets is just, it's a depreciation. I don't want to get too technical on the ESC, but that's just, we increase our asset base. So naturally, we'll get more back from the regulatory depreciation. But the one in the middle is this return on assets. And that's that cost of debt dropping off. And even though we're proposing to add 33% to our RAB at this stage, we're getting the same return on our assets that we got in the current price submission. So that cost of debt mechanism is a pretty powerful one that can, put a lot of squeeze on revenue. I guess if it does turn around, and I'm not going to forecast it will, but that may, at the back end up having quite a large impact if those rates go back up to where they were maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So a lot of work by myself and my team on that are just to understand that and do some scenarios around that, because we see that as, a potential, I guess, almost an uncontrollable for us. We just have to go with the flow on this cost of debt. And then the very small segment up the top is our tax liability. You can see there that, it's 3.66 million. We're forecasting 9 million in tax payments. It's not quite lining up, but you can see that it is quite a gap between what the pricing model and what we get back from our customers versus what we're actually paying under the NTER. And, it's significant. And really the only way we pay that is we borrow. It's as simple as that. So, we're, like I said, this is where we are at the moment. We're going to work very hard over the next 15 months, but there is, some significant uplift in expenditure that we're consciously making to deliver on the things Steve said in his first few slides. Can we go to the next slide, Steve, please? What I did for our strategy meeting is sort of just tried to break down what, when I say driving the 2.4, what are the major components that are increasing our revenue requirement. And as Steve said, for us, $25 million water storage it's a large project for our business. And of course, with only 22 or 3,000 customers, that's you can't build something that size and not have a price impact. So that's the biggest wedge there. And then counteracting that is our desludging program. You know, I've been with the business 18 years, and apart from a couple of smallish desludging projects, the Bensdale Wastewater Treatment Plant one this year has been the largest desludging project, and there's been a lot of work around the biosolids and desludging strategies, and a lot of our wastewater lagoons are at a point where they just need to be desludged for all the reasons Steve mentioned. So we've inbuilt $5 to $6 million over the next 5 years, and probably up to about 7 or 8 over the price submission period to actually have these lagoons desludged and to meet our compliance. And also, you know, you can't keep filling up your wastewater lagoons; they will get, you know, too full at some stage. So we want to avoid that. And as I mentioned, the Sun Lake storage and the Wyong storages, they're a couple of our, I guess, larger midpoint storages along our delivery line, and they need a fair bit of, you know, upgrading and relining and that. So they're in themselves around a $6 million spend each. So there's some pretty large projects in there, and then you can just see some other little things in there like our tax. Yeah, that will increase you know, the revenue requirement, and also some decommissioning of some old legacy assets that you know, again, to make sure we're meeting our asset management step change, we need to take these redundant assets offline or dispose of them or pull them down. So there's been a lot of work done around that in the last 2 to 3 years, and that's forecast to continue into the future. And then there's some things there like when the little PIP thing there is sort of our planning and investigations project. So again, that's discretionary spend by us, but we see a need to increase in that area to make sure that we deliver the correct forward look, you know, capital and OPEX profile. So, like I said, this is now probably 5 or 6 months old, and we've moved on from there. But I guess, you know, at least we've got a good understanding of, from my point of view, what's driving a potential proposed increase. Next slide, please, Steve. So I thought, you know, I have said we're doing a lot of work, so I thought I'd actually give you some examples. So we've got our urban water strategy. I won't say much more on that, it's not my area of expertise, but I just know there's an absolute bucket load of work being done in the strategy team to deliver that. Across the business, we've set up near on 40 odd strategies across the business using the same framework, resulting in the same inputs into the price submission. So we've got uniformity across our business in terms of the way it's analysed by the strategy owners and by the data we get, so we can actually have accurate price modelling. They're all due in their first draft in about 2 months, so that'll give us a lot of lead time into the pricing submission. There has been an absolute bucket load of work as well done on our renewals profile. I think Steve mentioned our replacement ratio was down at about 0.3, 0.4. We know, you know, there is a lot of assets out there that will need replacing and renewing. So there's been a specific team almost put on this to make sure that come, you know, choices around investment for renewals, there's accurate data there, and I guess the renewals are done in the right areas to help us with our service standards to customers. And I guess the last one is one I'm involved in. I'm pretty chuffed, to be honest, that we've got 3 water corps with 3 different billing and CRM current software packages at different stages of their life. And I guess we've teamed up to go out and look at a feasibility / possibility of coming together on a solution to the aim is to keep the cost of that down, or the functionality, get more bang for our buck. And I guess we've got to the point where we've actually engaged a consultant. So we're at phase 1, which is, it's a feasibility stage, and I guess we're looking at, you know, the very basic, which is procurement of a product for 3, which should deliver savings as opposed to 1 approaching the market, all the way through the various options to I guess the far right one would be a potential hosting solution by even another water corp or something like that. So nothing's off the table there. We all need new billing and CRM projects. So, you know, we've got a lot of drive behind this, and I guess it's just good to see some, I guess, wheels what's the saying? The wheels start spinning on this, which is great. So the aim is for phase 1 to lead into phase 2, which is a business case, and then that'll inform our price submission. So a lot of work's happening there, which is great. And I guess the last 3 items I just want to mention, we have decided, we got some good feedback from the ESC that our major trade waste pricing was unique to the industry. So we took that as a key to have a review. So we're doing that. So that's in process at the moment. I guess we're just trying to make sure there's not a lot of cross subsidies, from customers that aren't putting major trade waste into a system, or vice versa. So there's a little project team on that at the moment, and we're just kicking that off. And the same with our customer contributions. We're 0 at the moment. We went to 0 in Water Plan 3. Steve said we are seeing some growth, with the COVID and everything else. So we've again engaged a consultant to help us review that, and potentially, if the calculations comes out that we need to start charging new customer contributions, we'll start the engagement process. So again, that's a piece of work that's about to kick off. And then the other one is it's more a model input, and probably it's just, I won't go into details, but basically our regulatory depreciation, when you compare it to other businesses, is probably the top 1 or 2 in terms of percentage recovered. We've just had our reval done for infrastructure, and we're going to look at using the lives around our reval data as opposed to what's in our regulatory books, because I believe that we're recovering our assets through the pricing model too quickly compared to the actual life of the asset. So that's a bit technical, but again, if we can somehow smooth that to be more reflective of our asset profile, that will reduce our revenue requirement without putting the business financial sustainability at risk. So a bit of work to happen there, but I guess those 3 things are just ways that we're trying to make sure that we keep our customers' prices as low as possible whilst delivering what we want to deliver. Next slide, Steve, which I think might be it. It is it. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks. We thought we might take a break there before we move into the Minister's Letter of Expectation. So any questions on the presentation so far?
Yeah, I've got one, Steve. I'll jump in first. Looking in, actually, I was thinking about this earlier this morning, knowing we're going to have your presentation, and thinking about the resilience of your systems and your infrastructure, and given it's dispersed, spread across your region, good to see that you're investing in that resilience, but as well as the physical resilience of it. How much of your thinking is around technology and the ability to remotely access and remotely operate that infrastructure, given one, the distances between them, but also the ability to get staff in should there be fires, and then even the impact after fires or floods where you can't access?
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I didn't mention it, but most of our facilities are not manned. They're operated remotely, and we attend periodically to do physical checks and maintenance, but often they're running automatically, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So part of that resilience is we will be investing in what we call our SCADA systems, or our telemetry systems. And what we found was, even during the bushfires, while we had systems operating, ringed by fire, mobile phone system went down, communication system went down, and so at some stage we were also blind in terms of how those systems were operating. So it was an issue for us in a few areas, and so we're having to upgrade systems to overcome that. So that's part of our resilience investment.
Thanks.
Steve, if I just jump in there, we did receive $1.3 million funding from DELWP this financial year, and one of the major projects is to upgrade our SCADA backbone, I guess, network, so that, like Steve said, if the mobile network does go down, we don't lose our ability to communicate with our remote plants and that sort of stuff. So that project is well underway, which is great.
Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. We did receive some funding through DELWP. I think it was more than just the 1.3. So we received some funding to bring some projects forward, but also to effectively build up some resilience in some of our assets. So we probably came through it fairly cost neutral in terms of the damage that was done by the fires and what we were able to get back via insurance or government grants. So we're very grateful for that. Any other questions?
Maybe just a comment, although I'm sure Morris might have a question. I think I really appreciate the kind of very careful analysis and breakdown that you've done to present the situation. I think there's obviously a lot of kind of food for thought there, and no doubt further conversations. So I've just, Morris, I've just suggested you might have something, but I can see in the interim, Renwick from Health had a question.
Yes, I just want to. I've noticed in terms of the sort of the presentation in terms of the water infrastructure investment, and I've noticed in reading the corporate plan, there's like in terms of the wood grain upgrade, you've also got increasing local storages, water harvesting capacity, and upgrade treatment plants. I just want to get a sense and idea of investment with aging infrastructure in the reticulation system from the water from the drinking water space, in terms of, in particularly what I'm trying to get an idea of, it's in terms of distribution water storage tanks, the integrity of them, and I guess of the resilience theme, the upgrades or the capital expenditure in making them more I guess resilient to the climate change factors.
Yeah, so our investment is across the board. We've probably highlighted in the corporate plan document the big ticket issues, but as Matt said, there's 90 something million dollars of investment going on, and most of that's going to be in existing assets. So there are a range of projects. We're putting in an additional storage in Buchan. We're relining existing tanks that have reached the end of their life. We're re-roofing tanks. We've upgraded already because of the fires. We spent more than $1 million upgrading water treatment in some of our smaller communities so they can be more resilient to dirty water events, which we expect more often. So, that investment's across the board. It's certainly not just about water storage or volume. It's about treatment and distribution and providing that to our customers and then taking it away, of course, and treating that.
Thanks, Steve. My sort of question and comment comes from the sort of observation from across the states in particularly last year that has resulted in boil water advisories of tank integrity, and so that's why I've asked that question in terms of understanding the investment into the existing infrastructure in terms of in the distribution system and not just the treatment process.
Probably add to that, Renwick, that it's been a really big focus for a long time to remove any unnecessary intermediate storages where they're not probably needed, and to make sure that we do annual inspections to ensure the integrity of all those storages, and ingress during flood, during heavy rainfall events doesn't impact the water quality adversely. So it is a really big focus for us, and we have a program that we make sure that we inspect them. There's a few water tanks in the system that are being upgraded now, and our Metung tank is an example of one of those that's currently being upgraded and looked at. So we have a pretty robust program, and it's a really big focus for us. And I think we haven't had an incident for a while of an ingress issue resulting in a water quality problem, but it's something you've got to keep on top of and keep moving.
Thanks, Lara.
Okay.
I think, seeing as how you put me on the spot, I think I know what she's referring to. The expectations around bills and prices. Obviously at the last review, there was quite a clear message given out to the water corporations. I think it's a bit more nuanced for the price review coming up. There's a recognition that there are upward cost pressures around resources and environmental standards and so on. So there's that hard kind of ceiling is not really the line going forward. However, having said that, there will still be quite a strong expectation on affordability, and for water corporations to demonstrate they've done everything they can to keep bills down within their control, and tied to potential bill increases, there needs to be an emphasis on support for vulnerable customers that goes along with that. And I think that's probably the vibe that's coming out at the moment. I'm not saying it's a direction; it's more a vibe. I think that where our intention is to give a steer to the water corporations as we go into the next price review when the ESC puts their guidance out later in the year. There was another point I was going to make, slipped my mind, but that's the main one. I'll leave it now. I'll stop wittering. Sorry.
Yeah, we're extremely conscious that this is a political process we're in as well. It's not just about the ESC pricing model. There are some quirks of the model which just don't make sense, which I think need to be addressed. But the output at the end of the day, if it means a significant price increase, is obviously going to be politically unpopular. So we are quite aware of that. But it's a case of, I guess, being frank and honest and calling it as it is. And we're going to be very evidence-based, very systematic. If necessary, we will just simply take on more debt, I suppose, as Matt has said. But if there's a long-term disconnect between prices and cost, at some point there'll need to be a correction. And I think that's it becomes a more difficult political decision the longer you go on, I suppose.
I think it's also crucial to explain to customers and the community, and ultimately, I guess, the minister, about the value that is being presented to customers if prices are going up. What are they getting for it? And I'm not sure that discussions around sort of the technical arcana of the pricing model is going to float the boat there. You can absolutely have the argument with the ESC. I understand that, but that's not really going to chime, I think, with anybody outside the regulatory field. So it is about what's the investment doing, what's it providing for customers, what value are they getting for it, is the critical conversation here.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. You mentioned vulnerable customers, and I think that's the key, of course, is that for many customers, flat prices or a small increase in prices may not be significant. But I guess the conversation is about the trend over the long time, which we'd all like it to be as flat as possible, but also vulnerable customers who may just not have that capacity to pay even a small increase. To put that into
at the margin, you will always be tipping somebody over the edge.
Yeah. And so we're very focused on our supporting our vulnerable customers. We had a significant impact here through the drought, then the fires, and then floods and COVID. So this is not a new event. So we worked very hard to target our vulnerable customers. We waived bills, we reduced bills.
Yeah, absolutely. You were brilliant. I've got to say that. So
yeah. So at the end of the day, to do that and to continue to do that, and maybe at even a more significant level, we're talking a few $100,000 per year for a relatively small number of customers. So this is quite manageable if we think about supporting those vulnerable customers rather than a price increase, which for many may not be an issue. The point at the end of the day, if prices keep the gap between our income and our expenditure keeps increasing, we're going to have a problem. And I guess we just feel we need to be upfront and honest in saying that. All right. Perhaps we better move on unless there's some other burning questions.
That's fine. Thanks, Steve.
So we'll now spend the next little while talking about our actions against the letter of expectations. So we'll move into those pretty quickly. Lara's going to kick us off.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thanks, Steve. The first area of the letter of expectations that we'd just like to touch on and give a bit of context to is our climate change mitigation program. And as we previously reported, our board have actually set us a stretch target beyond our pledge to DELWP about reducing our emissions. So we take this very seriously, and it's a very important program for us. So over the years, we've been working through the carbon hierarchy, so doing on-site operational improvements, VSD upgrades, pump replacements and the like, to behind the meter solar installations, and in one case we've also got a battery site as well. And now we're moving into a new phase in 21-22, and we're moving towards some really larger flagship projects. So, we actually have over 18 independent solar installations across our whole system, and that's counting. So I might get you to move to the next slide, Steve. So for 2021-22, like I said, some of our biggest solar projects will be going in the ground, hopefully. And the first one that's progressed through its feasibility stage is our Paynesville solar installation, and we're forecasting that that'll reduce our emissions by about 250 tonnes per annum. And the other project that's currently in feasibility stage is our Wyong solar project, and where it's progressing quite quickly through that stage, and we'll get a fair way through, perhaps even commencing construction in 21-22 as well. So I might move to the next slide, Steve. I'll move on to customer and community, and as we've laid out quite a few items in the corporate plan about, in general, our customer and community programs. So we thought we'd take the opportunity to talk to DELWP a little bit about our price submission engagement program. And we wanted to start off by highlighting that we're really, really proud of our performance in terms of the ESC survey for customer satisfaction that's been going for a few years now. And we've consistently been in the top 1 or 2 throughout that whole time in the 4 areas of measure that the ESC have been looking at. But we're not complacent about that, and we're really wanting to continue to be leading in that sort of space. And we don't necessarily need to be leading in that space through expensive or elaborate engagement programs, but we're doing that through being seen as a part of the community. So I might move on to the next slide, Steve. So where are we at with our price submission engagement? Well, it's in full swing, and we are really we're really excited that we actually got quite a number of opportunities to do face-to-face catch-ups in a little window between COVID lockdowns. So we just think that's been really really good opportunity for us, because we know a lot of our customers like face-to-face opportunities to engage. So you can see the team there at the East Gippsland Field Days in April, and that was a great event for us. It was the launch of our face-to-face program, and we found we got some really great feedback in our exploration phase at that point. So, but not only that, we found the use of Zoom and Teams and virtual events really beneficial for our stakeholder engagement program. So we've had a number of focus group events as well. And we've had one deliberative forum event for the urban water strategy, which has been very beneficial as well. So we've got 2 more sessions in that forum, and we've also got a price submission deliberative forum that we will establish. So a busy space for finding out what our customers want in 21-22, and we feel that really deeply understanding our customers will mean that we continue to be a leader in the space of providing benefit to our customers and our community. And so what have we found out so far about our customers? And this might be of interest to DELWP. A change from the last price submission engagement is that they're quite concerned about growth and water security. So they're aware that people are moving to the area because of COVID. They know it's a great place to live and recreate, and people are moving down here. And so our customers are seeing that, and they know that we want to be able to provide those services to them, and is there enough water, and is there enough security of water supply. So overall message from our customers really seems to be, keep doing what you're doing. Don't over-engage with us. We don't want to hear from you about everything in too much detail. They're in the more involve and sort of collaborate on some things, but not too far the other way. So we kind of already know that about them, but it's good to hear that's where they're at the moment. So again, the key thing that's coming through is really just don't compromise core services, and where possible provide improved customer and community outcomes and environment outcomes too. So I might leave it there and hand over to Steve for the next couple of slides.
Okay, so now I'm back in again. I'm going to talk about Aboriginal water value. And I guess we have I've got to say, we have a fantastic relationship with the Gunnakurno Land and Water Corporation, or DELWP as we call them, which represents the local Gunnakurno Aboriginal community. We talk often. We plant ideas about how we can assist them, and I guess we see the most significant thing we can do is around helping them to gain some economic independence or economic opportunity. And so I've got a few examples. There are others we were talking about, but I'll just go through these couple. So you may be aware that earlier this year, DELWP were granted a 2,000 megalitre water entitlement in the Mitchell River. And that's a fantastic opportunity for them to use that water for some purpose to generate revenue and income or an enterprise. And I'm sure as time goes on, they'll be able to work through that and maximise that for themselves. And I think it's a fantastic, really great example, I think unique in Victoria, of an Aboriginal community getting a bulk entitlement. But they don't actually own any land along the river or any water storages. So what we've just indicated, that, and maybe just in the beginning until they get going, but to assist them to perhaps make better use of that water, because at the moment probably the only thing they can do is trade it spontaneously. And of course it's really most valuable in summer when there's not much flow in the river. So we've indicated to them there might be an opportunity for them to occupy some of the space in our off-stream storages. In most years when we won't perhaps need our full capacity, we might share some of our capacity with them and enable them to perhaps trade that water later or release it later at more favourable terms. So that I'd put that in the 10% of progress so far. We've got a long way to go, it's just an idea. Another opportunity we've been talking to them about is a bush tucker ecotourism enterprise setting up on some land we own near Lakes Entrance. I'd put that at 50% likelihood. And I probably should just go back a bit, and what we've learnt from talking to the traditional owners is you have to be patient. We have to understand that the decision-making processes they have to go through may take time, but also even if we all agree we want to do something, they may not have the workforce to actually make it happen. So often the ideas we're planting may not sort of come to fruition for a few years, but we're shooting ideas all the time and we have a great relationship with them. So something a bit more practical is just in the last few weeks, DELWP completed a project for us to landscape around our gardens here at Bairnsdale, and the gardens look fantastic, but it's also a really practical way of assisting the Aboriginal community to sort of establish some economic income. So they're trying to establish a landscaping business and we're one of their first customers. Moving on.
Steve, sorry, I'm just going to jump in and just to flag that a few of us might need to jump off. We've got a water and catchments meeting. So I'll just say quickly a thank you and farewell, and hopefully some other people will be able to stay around for a few more minutes, but really appreciate the time from you and your team today.
No, that's fine. We've a couple to go, but we appreciate we're over time. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Leadership and culture is another key part of the letter of expectation. We think of diversity and inclusion at its broadest level. We're certainly well aware of the requirements under the Gender Equality Act, which are new compliance obligations for us as well, because there are significant requirements to assess our current situation, gap analysis, action plan, implement, monitor, report. So we're actually out recruiting for a full-time person to help us deliver on those opportunities. We're also support and regularly participate in various diversity inclusion events and networks, and I've got a few of them on the presentation there. For instance, the Gippsland Environmental Agency's Women's Leadership Team, Pride in Water, etc. Probably just highlight the newspaper article on the top right. So we were involved in the Insight Women's Leadership Program and Bridging the Gap. So Lara was involved in that, and she had, I think, had some great outcomes out of it and would be a great advocate for the project or for the program, which we hope will continue. That's Lara on the right-hand side. On the left next to Lara is Beck Hemmings. She's actually another exciting sort of young woman leader from the East Gippsland CMA, just up the road. And I guess one of the benefits of the program was the local networking that's gone on. So there were other participants from Gippsland in the program, and I think that's a bit of a spin-off. And in an interesting outcome, Beck will actually begin a secondment with us for about 6 months next month. She will come and bring her skills and energy into East Gippsland Water, help us progress a few projects in terms of our preparation for the price submission, pick up a few skills with us, and then she'll return back to the CMA and continue her leadership journey. And I think that's a really nice little spin-off benefit, and I think that's essentially what the program's about, I hope. So I'm going to continue on now and hand back to Lara for our last slide.
Yeah, thanks. As Steve mentioned, this is our last slide, and I just thought, as we've mentioned earlier, we're really committed to being seen as part of the community in East Gippsland and delivering livability, resilience and recreation outcomes is a key part of being seen as part of the community. So even down to our step change in asset management, small things like removing that columnar tank you can see in the picture, which is actually a redundant asset. It improves the amenity for those customers, and it is a bit of an eyesore as you drive through to Lakes Entrance. So those customers are really happy because you can imagine how imposing that structure is in their backyard. And, it is just good practice to decommission assets, and we need to make sure we're progressing through that. The other thing I thought I'd highlight was quite often we get approached by third parties in our small communities in particular to support projects. So AusNet Services approached us a few years ago to see if we had any land available that was suitable for some backup power supply for Mallacoota, because it's a town that gets isolated from power quite frequently. And so we've worked with them, and it's quite a bit of work to sort of set up leases and license agreements and work with them to do that. But that was recently opened, and we were invited to that opening and seen as part of the team who delivered that project for Mallacoota. And interestingly, we've had another community group who want to put in Mallacoota want to put a solar installation at our water treatment plant. So we might go through the same process with them this year and allocate a parcel of land for this community solar project. So these are small things, but it's part of us being seen as part of the community, and maybe not driving things, but not blocking things happening. And yeah, the other thing we wanted to mention is that we've got quite a large program of capital works that we've committed to in our price submission, but we were also delivering over and above that through some quite often third-party funding programs that are delivering livability, resilience and recreation outcomes. And one of them I've pictured there too is a DELWP project where we're partnering with the council to deliver recycled water to the Bairnsdale City Oval. But these projects are over and above, and we're often at the party involved and doing what we can to either deliver these projects or to support their delivery. And that's how we'll end the presentation. Thank you.
So thanks everyone. Conscious we are a few minutes over, but happy to stay on and answer any questions or any comments.
Well, looks like you might have talked us all into silence there, Steve.
All right. Well, I might end this show.
Yeah, I might just quickly jump in and say, like, when I was asking for about resilience of your assets and all that, also cognizant that we're also in DELWP and water and catchments really interested and want to be on top of resilience in your team. I know you've had, the last 18 months has been really tough for East Gippsland Water. You guys have been through a hell of a lot. So we're also keen and interested to make sure that you guys are looking after yourselves, and if there's anything we can do to help in that space, certainly let us know. And with things opening up, well, maybe they're opening up, we'd look forward to coming down and visiting you again sometime this year, and actually having a look at some of this stuff on the ground.
Yeah, it would be good to see you, and yeah, appreciate your offer in terms of resilience. And I get one example that just pops into my mind straight away is your integrated water management team. We've been talking to them in the last, just as recently as this week, and they, as an example, they are really good at offering to assist and do a lot of the work that I guess on our behalf, which we really appreciate. So I do appreciate your offers. Thanks, Stuart.
No worries. So I suppose if there is no other questions or comments, just echo Heidi's words for and thank Therese and Steve and the team for the presentation. We do get a lot out of them, and it's a lot easier to have you guys talk to us about your plans and have it live like this rather than just reading the document that comes in via email. So yeah, once again, thank you very much for your time and your patience taking us through it.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you very much.
Bye now.
Bye all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.